Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be making a dress inspired by the movie Enchanted, a dress that Giselle wears. I really loved the off-the-shoulder design, sort of the summery, spring, innocent vibe that I'm getting. I'd love to just wear this all the time. I know it's not going to be very practical with the arms and all, but it's going to make for a really cute dress. I will be using a self-drafted draped bodice. That's how I'm going to be making the bodice section of this dress. And for the skirt, I will just be using a circle skirt, but grading it a bit larger than myself to then gather into the bodice. And I will be using some fabric that I found in my fabric basket. I think I bought it at a charity shop a while ago. A duvet cover with this really pretty subtle blossom design in this sort of ivory colour. I think it's quite nice and suits the project quite well. So without further ado, let's get into sewing. I have pre-cut my fabric. I have 4 pieces for the pocket pieces. These are my bodice pieces, so I have one set for the shell and then one set for the lining. And then I have my circle skirt, again with corresponding lining pieces. I'm starting off by sewing the pockets onto the side seams of the skirt pieces. I've done how to sew pockets in previous videos. I will link some in the description so you can find it there, but I just felt like I was repeating it too much, so if you'd like to know in detail how to do it, then go watch those. But basically sewing my pockets right sides together on the side seams, overlocking that edge, and then pressing the pocket outwards. So here's my front panel. I cut the front panel on the fold, and then with the 2 back pieces I didn't fold over the fabric, so we have 2 pieces for the back and 1 piece for the front. I used a circle skirt calculator. I will link that also down below, so you can put in your measurements and use that as a pattern. So I'm just pinning together the side seams of the skirt and sewing them down around the pocket too. Okay, I've done the same for the lining, but obviously there's no pockets in the lining, so I just sewed the side seams. Now I've got my outer and lining for the skirt. I'm just pinning them at the waistline, matching up all the seams and etc. To attach these together, I am installing a running stitch along the top, 2 rows of this, so then I can gather them later into the bodice. And this just kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone, attaches the 2 together and also allows me to gather at the same time. So pulling on the top 2 threads, leaving the bobbin threads to create some gathers. Leaving the skirt for now, we're moving on to the bodice. I have my bodice pieces here. Again, I made this out of a draped pattern of mine. So I'm making the bodice with princess seams. So I've got my center front piece and my side front piece, and I'm just pinning those together along both sides of the center front, and I'm going to sew those down. Once that is sewn, I've got my side back pieces, and with right sides together, I'm sewing that down to the side front pieces. And then once that's sewn, I am taking my center back pieces, and I've left a little bit of a seam allowance on these at the center back because I'll be adding a zipper into the back of this dress. And here are all the pieces sewn together, and I've got my lining piece here. So I am going to be sewing down these seam allowances along the edge to create a channel for the zip ties, and this will just add a bit of structure and boning, I guess, to the bodice, just because this will be an off-the-shoulder design and I want the bodice to not sag or anything, so I just want it to have a bit of structure. So just feeding that through and cutting off the end and making sure that I have at least a centimeter at the top and bottom of the bodice, so when I finish these edges, the zip tie won't get caught and break my needle. So that's the lining all fully boned using the seam allowances. And here's my lining piece. I've just draped it on my mannequin, and I've just drawn a rough armhole shape, and I will be cutting that out. So folding it in half so I can get it symmetrical and cutting that out. And doing the same on my outside fabric too. Here I've got a long strip of fabric. I think it was about 3 inches long, and however long I could get it. This was actually a ruffle on the sheet cover, so it was quite convenient. It already had a rolled hem at the top, so I used that as the top of the ruffle. And basically I'm just going to sew a line of stitching along the center and then along the bottom edge to then gather it up. And here is my gathered strip. I've got my main bodice and I am pinning that ruffle right sides together along the top edge. And when I get to the armhole section, I am measuring about 10 centimeters. With that measured, I'm taking the end of the 10 centimeters and pinning that to the top of the back edge, if that makes sense, just so we've got a little bit of fabric to go around our arm. When the ruffle is all tacked in place, and I'm going ahead and sewing the front bodice and the skirt together along the waistline, right sides together, matching up all of the important seams, like the side seams and the center fronts and the backs, and distributing the gathers of the skirt accordingly. So here's how she's looking, and the ruffles need to be sewn down. So before I do that, I'm going to tackle the armhole. So this edge right here is going to be exposed, so we need to bind this. So I'm taking the strip of bias binding, so I'm unfolding it and pinning it to the edge of the ruffle like so, and sewing along that folded edge. And then once that's sewn, I am folding it all over to the wrong side and top stitching that down. and we've created a nice little binding strip for the bottom side of our sleeves. Now it's finally time to encase the ruffles and sew them in place at the neckline. I've got my lining and I'm just sandwiching all of that. So here's the lining and the front bodice. Pin those wrong sides together with the ruffles in between. So I will sew all the way across the neckline, but when it gets to the armhole I'm just going to miss the sleeve that we bound with the bias binding, just sewing the lining and the front bodice pieces together. The camera lost footage of me doing this, but I basically turned everything right side out, and then with the lining I turned the waistline seam in with the iron about 1 centimeter, and then just hand sewed that to the waist seam of the skirt, and that just finishes off the inside of the dress really well. This is how I do it normally with all of my dresses that I make. I also went ahead and overlocked the sides of the dress all together basically, so we can sew the zip in really easily without dealing with any layers at all. Here I'm sewing up the back seam from the bottom up to where I want the zipper to end, and then I'll stop sewing to sew the zipper in. Here I've already gone ahead and tacked my invisible zipper into place, and I'm using my invisible zipper foot to sew my zipper in. Making sure that when I sew, all the seams are matching up, just because I had a couple of troubles with this earlier, but just make sure everything lines up when you're sewing in your zipper. Now I'm trying it on for the first time and it just feels a bit too loose and saggy, especially if this is an off the shoulder dress. It really needs to be kind of tailored and fit really well so it won't sag or fall in anywhere. So I've got a job to do and take out the zipper and just take it in about 1 centimeter or so. Okay, this is what it looks like with it taken in a little bit, and I'm much happier with the fit. I opted for hemming the lining and outside fabric separately. So for the lining I turned up my hem quite a bit more, so just to make sure that the lining won't be longer than the outside fabric. Sewing down a rolled hem. I always press my rolled hem with my iron first, just to make the sewing a lot more easy. Here I have my outside fabric that I'm hemming, and I'm just making a finer rolled hem with this one. Because we overlocked all the pieces together at the side seams earlier to sew in the zipper, I had to unpick it a little bit to sew the hems separately. So I'm just sewing them back together now. And as you can see, there's that difference in the lining and the main fabric, which I wanted. Moving on to the flowers now. I cut out 2 sizes. The first one was about 3 inches, like my strip was, and about 10 inches in length. And the other one was about half all of that. And I roll hemmed all the edges to finish off the edges. So I'm just going to run a line of basting stitches along one edge of the strip to then gather up. Okay, so here I have one of my large flowers, which will look a bit like this, and take one of the strands of the loose end and pull together. Now I normally do 2 rows of stitching, but for the sake of convenience, I'm gonna try and get away with just one. I've gathered that as much as possible, and now I'm going to take this piece of thread that we just pulled through, just place a couple stitches to join the two edges together. It doesn't have to be beautiful because it's sort of like a ruched flower where you just sort of have a texture of the gathers and the ruching. So just sort of pass your needle through both layers to kind of make them join. Okay, so now we have something that looks like this, a little bit of a donut. To bring all of this to the center. So I've just got my needle here and I'm gonna actually work from the back, I think, and just like pass my needle through and just keep doing this until I can sort of bunch it together. So we're gonna center. Okay, and this is what it's looking like from the front. And just kind of fill in the center. Oh, it's gonna take a while, but they're so pretty. I think they're gonna be pretty. So I'm taking all my flowers to my dress and just sort of arranging the placement and pinning it down roughly where I want it to go and how I want the ruffles to be sitting and everything. It's just a lot of manipulation and getting it to lie where you want it to. I mainly just use the big flowers going across and then the little ones to sort of like break it up a little bit and fill in some just like little gaps that I was getting. This took so long, but basically I just took my needle and thread and hand sewed all of the flowers in place. I didn't go all the way around of the flower, I just sort of sewed bits and anchored it down. But yeah, this took a while and you gotta commit and you've just, you know, gotta keep going and it will get done, don't worry. It took me maybe a few nights to get it all done, but I think it's really worth it. And that, my friends, is it. So how does it look? I really hope you enjoyed watching me make this. I hope you like the outcome. I really do. Let me know what you think. I hope you have a really lovely day and take care. Alright, see you later. Bye. The only problem is that I can't really move my arms at all. So, trying to do anything in this dress. It's the perfect lazy dress. What am I saying?